It's a bit dry out there. The frosts are taking most of the moisture off the top.
Well, they have, Rob, but I'd have to say it's probably been one of the mildest winters, and obviously a lot of people are talking about climate change and things like that, but the reality is that we probably haven't had enough moisture during the winter to offset what is likely to be, a shortage of water, especially in wells, because they're down certainly in Canterbury, and so that makes it more important in the spring that we try and, when we're planning to plant, that we're conserving moisture and that we're planting early and making all the right decisions to make sure that we maximise what we've got, really.
Yeah, so how do you prepare the soil?
Well, I think, spring's a pretty important time for planting of, in some areas, certainly further south, it's the main sowing season for pastures. And obviously across the country it's the main sowing season for brassicas for next year's winter feed, and it's a key time obviously for the new crop, Fodder Beet. So people are planting that as well. You can't get away from the age-old adage of ensuring that you have a reasonable fallow of some description to try and conserve moisture. Right. So whether you're going through using direct drilling systems or you're using traditional cultivation, you really want to go through and prepare in time to make sure you've got some form of conservation of what moisture you've got, and prepare the seed bed so that obviously when you plant the seeds, whatever they might be, they get that up and away and get a chance to germinate reasonably quickly.
So your Cambridge roller comes into its own?
Well, yes, all your various equipment, Rob, and some species can be direct drilled quite successfully, others can't, and so there's a real mix and match of what, just depending on individual farmers' circumstances, what they're going to use. But I think it's pretty key that we try and certainly conserve moisture. Conditions are good in terms of getting ground prepared and ready, so there's no concerns there at this point in time. Certainly in the Canterbury region, I know they've had quite a lot of rain up in the North Island, and probably certainly down south it's a wee bit wetter too. But in the region of Canterbury, it is pretty good at the moment.
Now you mentioned Fodder Beet. Any shortage of seed, or you're okay there?
Look. Seed supplies are coming in. I think the main issue that we face is obviously we've got to make sure that there's no more Velvetleaf comes into the country. So that's meant that MPI have put in place a pretty rigorous testing process. So when at the point of entry, biosecurity have taken care of basically testing every seed lot and making sure that seed coming in is clear. So that's a process that's going to slow things down, Rob. I mean, it's not like it used to be in terms of they have to take samples, send seed away to the official laboratories, get it tested, analysed, and then they'll think about releasing the shipment. So it's I think for farmers, because there is quite a lot of seed that's coming fresh from the European harvest that has just been, the time frame of availability is condensed even more than what it was in the past. So farmers need to be planning, and they need to be making sure that if they're wanting to plant fodder beet, that they get their order into their retailers as soon as possible. So at least they know where they stand. As to whether there'll be a shortage or not, I think it largely will depend on how MPI handle the process, because we've got to have the stuff in the ground by sort of end of November, early December. So it's just that handling the overall biosecurity logistics, really.
Has the industry, as in the growers, got on top with this Velvetleaf?
Well, it's been obviously MPI working with federated farmers, working with individual farmers. There's been a lot of meetings around the country, around the affected areas. It's not something that's going to go away. We've got it here now. It's a matter of monitoring and a matter of all the paddocks and farms have been identified, and obviously stock movements on those properties have been contained. So it's going to be a process of really monitoring and making sure that we don't allow this blooming weed to
Yes, right.
sort of expand further. Really.
Some very serious rogan.
Oh, shivers, yes. And I mean, if it gets into the broadacre arable cropping zone in mid-Canterbury, for example, I mean, in a broad scale, it will have some devastating consequences.
Let's go to Lucerne, because Lucerne, I know it's one of your favourites with Force 4, but it is for a reason.
Well, in terms of Lucerne, yeah, I mean, Force 4's been fantastic. It's a great variety, and it's really leading the charge out there. There's good seed supplies, so there's no shortage there. But in terms of just Lucerne generally, big upswing in interest in using it, mainly from the point of view of just its ability to tolerate pretty extremes of climate, but also it's a phenomenal feed for finishing animals, and I think the likes of Doug Avery up in Marlborough has done a tremendous job in terms of demonstrating what the value of Lucerne is in some of the harder country and what he's been able to achieve in terms of profitability on his farm. So I think you're seeing this upswing across the country now and people wanting to use Lucerne. So there's good supplies. Make sure you select your fields carefully, make sure you've done a soil test, you've got your pH right, and again, do a bit of planning. But you know, it's a plant that will survive for many years, Rob, and give you good, faithful production year in, year out.
Because seriously, I can't understand why people with a 28 block don't put Lucerne in, because small bales are gold for the equine industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's really good money in that. I think you're bang on. I mean, $20 a bale, for example, for really top quality Lucerne hay in small bales is not unheard of. So
and you're getting 5 or 6 cuts once it's established.
Yes, five or six cuts. Yes, during your first cut would normally be sort of late November. Then basically 30 days from then on through summer and into early autumn. Yep. So pretty good.
Absolutely.
So I think this interest will continue. Yep.
That's good. And very briefly, grasses.
Well, obviously further south we go, and even in parts of the other parts of the South Island and the North Island, spring planting is the traditional time for planting their permanent pastures down. So obviously, ryegrass is obviously the predominant species sown, but I think we're seeing now farmers starting to want to look at, and they're picking up on this resilient pasture approach, whereby they want to look at other species and integrating them either into their pasture mix. I'm talking about Coxford. Some of the new Coxfords are just top of this world, and also looking at alternative species like tall fescue and trying to use those as alternatives. So if you're going to plant a permanent pasture, I think seek some advice, and seek some advice that gives you both the agronomy and the fertility side of things, so you know exactly what you're doing before you start. So,
Mark, thank you very much indeed.